Most Mario fans know the story of the lost levels. Back in Japan, Nintendo made a direct sequel to Super Mario Bros. It was harder, meaner, and a little too comfortable with ruining your afternoon. But when it came time to release that game in America, Nintendo decided not to do it. So Japan got one Super Mario Bros. 2, and the US got a completely different Super Mario Bros. 2 instead. Years later, that original Japanese sequel finally came over here as The Lost Levels in Super Mario All-Stars. That is the famous Lost Mario game. But it was not the only set of official Mario levels that stayed behind. In 1986, another officially licensed Mario game was released in Japan. It had its own altered stages, strange enemies, and 2 different versions that most Mario fans never played. And this one was not made for the Famicom. It was not made for the NES either. It was not released on Nintendo hardware at all. This was Super Mario Bros. Special, a Hudson Soft computer game based on Super Mario Bros. At first, that sounds simple enough. Mario on computers. But Super Mario Bros. Special is not just the same game moved to a different machine. The stages are not the ones you remember. New items show up, old arcade enemies return, and the moment you start moving, you can tell something is off. It feels familiar and wrong at the same time. An official Mario game released outside Nintendo hardware from a brief moment in the 1980s when something this unusual could actually happen. The first thing to understand is that Super Mario Bros. Special was not a bootleg, a clone, or some unofficial computer knockoff. This was an official product. Hudson Soft released it in Japan in 1986 for Japanese home computers. Specifically, it appeared on NEC's later PC-8801 models and Sharp's X1 line. So from a modern perspective, this looks almost wrong. An official Mario game made by Hudson Soft for computers not made by Nintendo. But the back of the box makes it even better. The packaging joked that Mario had caused a huge commotion across the country. It said fathers were forgetting about work because the game was too fun. And it even claimed older brothers were starting to imagine Princess Peach as their ideal girlfriend, which is a lot to put on a computer game box. But that tells us something important. Hudson was not selling this as Super Mario Bros. 2. They were selling it as the Mario craze finally reaching personal computers. Today, that sounds almost impossible. Nintendo letting another company make an official Mario game for non-Nintendo hardware feels like something from an alternate timeline. But in 1986, it was not quite as random as it looks. So why Hudson? Why was this company allowed to put Mario on Japanese computers when today that feels like something Nintendo would lock in a vault and then build a second vault around it? The answer is that Hudson Soft was not some random outside studio wandering in from the street. Hudson came from the computer world. Before the Famicom became this giant force in Japan, Hudson was already making software for Japanese personal computers. The Japanese computer market was not one clean, simple platform. There were NEC machines, Sharp machines, Fujitsu machines, Toshiba machines, all these different computer families with their own quirks. And Hudson knew that world. And at the same time, Hudson became connected to Nintendo very early in the Famicom's life. At first, Nintendo expected to make Famicom software itself. But Hudson worked with Nintendo and Sharp on Family Basic, which let people program on the Famicom using a version of BASIC based on Hudson's own computer experience. After that, Hudson became the first outside company to release a Famicom game. So Hudson was in this unusual position. It understood Japanese computers, but it was also one of Nintendo's earliest outside partners in the console space. And that makes Super Mario Bros. Special a lot less random. Hudson had already released other licensed Mario games before this, including Mario Bros. Special and Punch Ball Mario Bros. And those were not simple one-to-one ports either. They were already taking Mario ideas and twisting them into strange computer versions. So by the time Super Mario Bros. Became a massive hit, a Hudson-made computer version was not unbelievable. The pieces were already there. Hudson knew Japanese computers, Hudson had worked with Nintendo, and Hudson had already been experimenting with Mario on computers. So Super Mario Bros. Special makes sense. What makes it interesting is what Hudson actually did with it. They did not just recreate Nintendo's game, they started changing it. The computers themselves are part of the story here. The NEC PC-8801 family and the Sharp X1 were not random machines on the edge of the market. These were important Japanese personal computer lines, with their own libraries, their own audiences, and their own place in Japan's game market. So if you were Hudson in 1986, this made sense. Hudson already knew Japanese computers. They were already making software across different computer families. And there were people who owned these machines who may not have had the same setup as a Famicom player, sitting in front of a TV with a controller. So bringing Super Mario Bros. To these computers was a real business idea. The challenge was the kind of game Hudson was trying to bring over. Super Mario Bros. Was built around smooth forward movement. Mario runs, the stage scrolls with him, and the game keeps feeding you just enough information to react as you go. That feeling is easy to take for granted now, but it was a huge part of why the original game worked so well. So Hudson had a difficult job. It had to take one of the most fluid console games of the time and make it work on Japanese PCs with very different strengths and limitations. When you first look at Super Mario Bros. Special, it is immediately recognizable. This is Mario. The blocks are there, the coins are there, the pipes are there. The basic goal is still the same. Get through the stage, reach the flagpole, and make your way towards Bowser. Even the overall structure is familiar. The game still uses 8 worlds, with 4 areas in each world. So on the surface, Hudson is clearly building this game around the same basic shape as Nintendo's original game. But then you actually start playing it. The opening looks familiar, but these are not the original levels. Hudson rebuilt the stages with new layouts, different enemy placement, and its own ideas of how a Mario level should work. That changes how this game comes across. A straight port lives or dies by how closely it recreates the original. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it fails, and sometimes you get something that looks like the original game was described over the phone during a thunderstorm. But Super Mario Bros. Special is doing something stranger. It keeps the basic rules of Super Mario Bros., the blocks, the power-ups, the castles, the flagpoles, but sends Mario through a different adventure. And to be fair, the results are mixed. The stages are not as clean or naturally readable as Nintendo's. They do not have that same effortless flow, where every jump and every enemy feels like it was placed exactly where it needs to be. But Hudson's version has ideas. There are moments where the altered layouts make the game feel new in a way that a straight computer port never would have. You are not just walking through a worse copy of the same old stages. You are seeing somebody else take the pieces of Super Mario Bros. And build a different route through them. But that does not automatically make the levels great. Some sections are awkward, some feel unfair, and some of the challenge comes less from the clever design and more from the game being harder to read than it should be. But that is what makes Super Mario Bros. Special interesting. It keeps pulling you in 2 different directions at once. Part of it feels like a rough computer version of Super Mario Bros., and part of it feels like Hudson trying to make its own Mario adventure with the tools it had. And once you see that, the game becomes harder to just dismiss. And Hudson did not stop at changing the stages. It also started adding things that were never in the original Super Mario Bros. Actual new items, new hazards, and enemies pulled from earlier Mario arcade games. And some of them are really strange for a Super Mario game. There is the hammer, which feels like it was pulled straight out of Donkey Kong. Mario grabs it and starts swinging it in front of him just like the arcade. In Donkey Kong, that makes perfect sense. In a Super Mario Bros. Level, it feels like Mario briefly remembered he used to have a different job. Then there is the wing. This lets Mario temporarily fly through the air using swimming-style movement. It looks awkward, but the idea itself is fascinating. Years before Super Mario Bros. 3 gave Mario the Super Leaf and the P-Wing, Hudson had already put a flight power-up into an official Mario game. There are also hidden bonus items. One of them is the Hudson Bee, the little bee mascot from Hudson Soft's own logo. Finding it gives you big bonus points. Then there's a clock that adds time to the timer, and the lucky star that clears every enemy on the screen. The catch is that it activates the moment you grab it, so it's only useful if there are actually enemies around. But the weirdness goes beyond items. Hudson also reaches back into Mario's arcade past for enemies and hazards that were never in the original Super Mario Bros. Alongside the familiar Goombas, Koopas, and Piranha Plants, Special brings in sidesteppers and fighter flies from the original Mario Bros. Arcade, plus rolling barrels and fireballs inspired by Donkey Kong. Even the falling icicles fit this older arcade-style pile of hazards. So the game starts to feel like a strange Mario remix. It is based on Super Mario Bros., but Hudson is pulling pieces from earlier Mario games, adding its own hidden bonuses, and dropping them into a brand new platforming adventure. And sometimes that is genuinely interesting. And other times you get the trampoline. The trampoline should be simple. You jump on it, you bounce upwards. But in Super Mario Bros. Special, even the trampoline feels like it's only loosely committed to the idea. That is kind of the game right there. Hudson clearly had ideas. The problem is that a Mario game depends on feel, and Special never quite gets that part right. Super Mario Bros. Special stumbles on the one thing that Mario has to get right: movement. The feel of Super Mario Bros. Starts there. In the original game, Mario has weight, momentum, and a stage that scrolls smoothly along with him. Enemies and platforms come into view as you move, giving you just enough time to react. That flow is a huge part of why the original feels so natural. Super Mario Bros. Special does not work that way. Instead of smooth side-scrolling, the game moves from one screen-sized section to the next. In the PC-88 version, this is especially rough. When Mario reaches the edge of the screen, the game briefly cuts to black, then the next section appears. So sometimes you're moving forward, the screen changes, and suddenly the game is asking you to react to something you could not see a moment ago. And in a Mario game, that is a big deal. Now the Sharp X1 version handles this better. Instead of cutting to black, the next screen slides into view. It's still not smooth scrolling, and it still feels strange compared to the original game, but it gives you more information. You can at least see the next chunk of the stage arriving before Mario's fully committed to it. Super Mario Special also runs much slower than the original game, and that is especially noticeable on the X1 version. This is basically the speed you're working with, unless you play on an emulator. And at that slower speed, the game is still very playable. In some ways, it almost feels designed around it. The stages ask you to move more carefully, and with the screen-by-screen layout, rushing ahead is usually how you get yourself into trouble. The game also slows down when the screen gets crowded. The Famicom had hardware sprites built for this kind of action, but these computer versions were not handling Mario and the enemies the same way. So when more enemies show up, the game can really start to chug. For the sake of this video, some of the X1 footage has been sped up a bit to make it easier to watch, but the slower pace is part of how this version works. It's not unplayable, it just requires a lot more patience than normal Super Mario Bros. I also found the controls to be kind of screwy too. Mario feels heavier here, less precise, jumping into blocks, landing on enemies, making small corrections in the air. It all feels a little off compared with Nintendo's original. You can get used to it after a while, but it never fully disappears. The visuals add to that feeling too. The PC-88 version has a much harsher color palette, and it can be harder to read at a glance. The X1 version looks better and feels more comfortable to look at for longer periods. Even if Mario himself looks like Ronald McDonald had an unfortunate meeting with a Simpsons character, the sound is recognizable enough, you know what it's trying to be, but it does not have the same clean, snappy feeling as the original game. And to be fair, this does not mean that these computers were bad, or that Japanese computer games could not be impressive. The issue was the way Super Mario Bros. Special was built. Hudson shipped it with this screen-by-screen structure, and that one choice fundamentally changes how Mario works. That is the frustrating part, because underneath all the awkward movement, weird colors, and questionable jumps, you can see the outline of a genuinely interesting alternate Mario adventure. It just happens to be trapped inside a version of Mario that does not always want to behave like Mario. So if you actually want to experience Super Mario Bros. Special today, there are really two different ways to think about it. The historically honest way is to look at the original computer versions. That means the PC-88 version, or preferably the Sharp X1 version. Those versions show what the game really was like back in 1986. But if you mostly want to see Hudson's alternate levels and ideas without fighting the original presentation, modern fan projects can make a lot more sense. One example is Super Mario Bros. Special 35th Anniversary Edition, which is a fan-made ROM hack of the original Super Mario Bros. That recreates Hudson's game within the NES engine, including the arcade enemy additions and the new power-ups. There is also Super Mario Bros. Remastered on PC, which includes a Super Mario Bros. Special mode. These are not the original 1986 computer game, and they should not be treated like they are. But they are useful in a different way. They let you see Hudson's stage ideas through a smoother, more modern lens. The trade-off is that once the game scrolls and controls more like normal Super Mario Bros., you lose what made the original release so strange in the first place. So after spending time with Super Mario Bros. Special, I don't really see it as just a failed attempt to bring Super Mario to computers. It is rough, no question. Compared directly with Nintendo's original, it is clumsy, harsh, and sometimes frustrating in exactly the way it looks. The controls feel off, the screen transitions change the whole rhythm of the game, and there are moments where it feels like Hudson had a cool idea, then trapped it inside a version of Mario that could barely handle it. But that is also what makes it interesting. This is Mario from a time before the series had completely settled into what we now expect it to be. It is official, but it feels unfamiliar. It has the shape of Super Mario Bros., but it also has Hudson's fingerprints all over it. New stages, strange items, arcade callbacks, weird hazards, a company mascot hidden inside a Mario game. It is not a hidden masterpiece, but it is a fascinating part of Mario history. If you had this game on your family's home computer back in the 80s, you would have played the heck out of it. You would have complained about it, you would have blamed the controls, you would have yelled at that dang trampoline, but you still would have kept going, because underneath all the awkwardness, there is still something charming about it. Super Mario Bros. Special feels like a little piece of Mario history from a door that closed almost as soon as it opened. A short moment where an outside company could take Nintendo's biggest new game, rebuild it for Japanese computers, and accidentally create one of the strangest official Mario games ever released. And if you manage to make it all the way through, the game leaves you with the only ending message that really fits. Congratulations. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for your time today. Goodbye.